An al-Qaeda affiliate now allegedly becoming one of the top terror groups to watch out for. That's according to a new report. Their branch in Syria is more of a long-term threat to the United States than ISIS. Republican Congressman Michael McCall of Texas is here now, chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee and the author of the new book, Failures of the Imagination, the Deadliest Threats to Our Homeland and How to Thwart Them. Congressman, great to see you.
Hey, Greg, thanks for
having me. All right, so I read this report, American Enterprise Institute and the Institute for the Study of War. I was unpersuaded that al-Qaeda in Syria is more of a threat than ISIS. What about you?
I still think ISIS is probably the #1 threat. They are the game in town. 35,000 foreign fighters converging in Iraq and Syria makes them a huge threat. And now they're conducting external operations. Having said that, I think the traditional wisdom is that al-Nusra, which is part of the al-Qaeda affiliate, al-Qaeda brand, have always been a little more sophisticated at pulling off larger scale attacks. The Khorasan group that I talked about in my book,
right.
Trying to down airplanes with non-metallic IEDs and that sort of thing, I think makes them a little more sophisticated for large-scale attacks. But let's face it, in terms of numbers, sure. ISIS is the game in town.
Well, and that invites the question, does President Obama fully understand and appreciate the threat that ISIS poses? Once again, in his State of the Union address, he seemed to sort of downplay the threat of ISIS.
Well, he always does. The point of my book is to tell the American people the truth about the threats we face as a nation. I think for too long this administration has downplayed that threat. He said in the State of the Union they're not a existential threat to the United States, which is, I'm getting pretty much the same types of briefings. I don't understand the rhetoric versus reality. He calls them JV team. They're not JV team. When he says the war on terror is over, Baghdadi declares the caliphate almost within the same week. So it never matches up. I just don't think he wants to deal with it. It doesn't fit in his campaign narrative. And we don't have a strategy to defeat and destroy them, which is what I lay out in the book.
All right. Let's talk, if we can, about your book. And by the way, again, Failures of Imagination just came out. I'm not giving it back because I'm not through with it yet. But you lay out some threat scenarios to the homeland. Let's put them up on the screen. Decapitation strike at the U.S. Capitol, which is a little frightening. Bioterror down in Orlando at the Magic Kingdom. A massacre at the Mall of America in Minnesota. Russia launching a new Cold War. A cyber strike on the world's financial capital in New York. And it goes on and on. Bioterror on our southern border. How real are these threats in your mind, and how prepared are we to prevent them?
Well, in each chapter, I lay out a fictional scenario to get the interest of the reader and the American public. And then I say, could it really happen? That piece is an educational piece to the American people and the policymakers on what the terrorists have done in the past, what they have done or doing in the present, and what they plan to do in the future. And then finally, what can we do to stop it in each of these chapters? You talk about the dirty bomb coming across the U.S.-Mexico border. Very realistic scenario. ISIS in their publication Debate talk about smuggling a Pakistani nuclear weapon into the Western Hemisphere and across the U.S.-Mexico border. So this is all fact-based, but it's designed, again, to have an honest discussion with the American people. I hope it's a point of discussion in the 2016 presidential race. I'm highly critical, obviously, of the administration's national security and foreign policy.
Sure. We think of al-Qaeda and ISIS as launching, sort of conventional attacks using bombs and so forth. What about a devastating cyber attack that could not only shut down our nation's financial institutions, but do damage to our utility grids, for example?
I think, we focus a lot on ISIS. Paris was horrible, San Bernardino. You're talking about limited numbers of lives. A cyber attack has enormous consequences, huge damage, shutting down the power grid in the Northeast. The Northeast got snowed under.
Right.
But imagine everything being shut down power-wise for weeks. Total, utter chaos, a stock exchange. So the chapter in my book talks about quantum computing, a relatively sophisticated area that deals with reigning chaos in the cyberspace. And we have a lot of enemies out there: Russia, China, Iran and North Korea all have cyber capability, and the jihadists want to get that as well.
Yeah, we think mostly of the Chinese and the North Koreans when we think about cyber attacks. Congressman Michael McCaul, the book is Failures of Imagination. It's a good read so far. I'm going to keep going at it. Thank you for being with us to explain it.
Great. Thanks for having me.
All right.